Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Vincent Wiggins had built his life with the same methodical precision he used to construct the luxury homes that made him one of Millbrook's most successful contractors. At 42, he owned Wiggins Construction, employed 37 people, and had transformed a small-town business into a regional powerhouse. His calloused hands and sharp mind had earned him everything he thought mattered: a beautiful home on Cedar Hill, a thriving business, and a family he believed loved him unconditionally. Diane Wiggins moved through their marble-floored kitchen with practiced grace, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she prepared breakfast. 20 years of marriage had settled into comfortable routines, though Vincent sometimes noticed the way her smile seemed to require effort lately. Their daughter Kayla, 19 and home from college for summer break, scrolled through her phone at the breakfast table, her dark hair falling like a curtain between them. "The Morrison project needs my signature today," Vincent said, adjusting his work shirt. "Should be home by 6. Diane nodded without looking up from her coffee. "I'll be at the country club with Marina Brennan. Some charity planning thing." Vincent kissed her cheek, the gesture automatic after 2 decades. Her perfume smelled different, sharper, more expensive than usual. "Love you." She murmured, already distant. Vincent's business partner, Alan North, waited in the truck outside. They'd been friends since high school, building their construction empire from nothing but determination and Alan's knack for numbers. Alan's weathered face showed concern as Vincent climbed into the passenger seat. "You look like hell, Vince. When's the last time you took a real day off?" "After the Morrison contract closes. Then maybe Diane and I can take that trip to Italy she's been talking about." Alan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Yep, about Diane." "The Morrisons sight first," Vincent interrupted, sensing something in his friend's tone he wasn't ready to hear. "We can talk later." The Morrison estate sprawled across 12 acres of prime lakefront property. Vincent's crew worked with the efficiency of a Swiss watch, each man knowing his role in the complex choreography of high-end construction. Vincent felt the familiar pride, watching his vision take shape in steel and stone. By afternoon, the stress Vincent had been ignoring for months manifested in a crushing weight across his chest. He'd been pushing too hard, eating poorly, sleeping less. The warning signs had been there, but Vincent Wiggins didn't have time for weakness. The heart attack struck him like a sledgehammer at 3:47 p.m. Chapter 2. The Revelation. Vincent's eyes opened to sterile white walls and the steady beep of heart monitors. His chest felt like someone had driven a truck through it, and 4 lines snaked from both arms. Dr. Gabriel Tate, the cardiologist who'd become familiar over the past 3 days, reviewed his chart with practiced concern. "You're lucky, Mr. Wiggins. Minor heart attack, but your body's been sending warning signals for months. Stress, poor diet, overwork, the classic recipe for cardiac events in men your age. My family, we called your emergency contacts immediately. Your business partner, Mr. North, has been here every day. Your wife." Dr. Tate hesitated. "Well, I'm sure she has her reasons." Alan appeared in the doorway, his face tight with an emotion Vincent couldn't identify. "Hey, partner, how you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a freight train." "Where's Diane?" "Kayla." Alan's jaw clenched. "Vince, we need to talk." "Not now, Alan. I just want to see my family." "That's what we need to talk about." Vincent's phone lay on the bedside table, powered off since his collapse. When he turned it on, the screen lit up with notifications that made his damaged heart race for different reasons. 67 missed calls from Diane, most from the past day. But it was the social media notification that stopped his breath. Kayla had tagged him in a photo posted the day after his heart attack. The image showed Diane, Kayla, and several family friends at what looked like a backyard barbecue. Everyone was smiling, laughing, raising glasses in celebration. The caption read, "Family Day without the drama. Sometimes you need to step away from toxic energy and just enjoy life. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family time, hashtag new beginnings." Vincent stared at the screen until the words blurred. His daughter had called him toxic. His wife was celebrating while he fought for his life in intensive care. "There's more," Alan said quietly. "Show him the rest." Vincent scrolled through Diane's social media with numb fingers. 3 days of posts showing her at restaurants, shopping, spending time with friends. Not one mention of her husband in the hospital. In fact, the posts painted the picture of a woman finally free from some burden. The most recent post from just hours ago showed Diane and a man Vincent didn't recognize at an upscale restaurant. The man's hand rested possessively on Diane's thigh, and she was looking at him with an expression Vincent hadn't seen directed at him in years. The caption read, "Life is too short not to be happy. Here's to new adventures with people who actually appreciate you. Hashtag second chances, hashtag happiness." Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "We need you. Answer immediately. This is urgent." Alan's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "Vince, I should have told you sooner. I've seen them together. Diane and Brandon Cross, the real estate developer from the city. It's been going on for months." Chapter 3, The Awakening. Brandon Cross. Vincent knew the name. A smooth-talking developer from Charlotte who'd been trying to buy up lakefront property for a luxury resort project. Diane had mentioned meeting him at various charity events, always speaking positively about his vision for the community. Vincent's phone continued buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Diane. "Vincent, please call me back. There's been a mistake. The bank is asking questions about some accounts. I need you to call them. This is serious. Call me now." Vincent set the phone aside and looked at Alan. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for about 6 months. Confirmed it last month when I saw them at that hotel in Asheville. I wanted to tell you, but..." Alan's weathered hands clenched into fists. "I was hoping I was wrong. Tell me everything." Alan pulled a chair close to the hospital bed. "Brandon Cross isn't just some developer, Vince. He's a predator. I did some digging after I saw them together. He's got a pattern. Targets married women with wealthy husbands, particularly those in construction or real estate. There was a woman in Savannah whose husband owned a development company. Cross had an affair with her, convinced her to get her husband to invest in a project, then disappeared with both the money and the wife. The husband lost everything. Vincent's mind, despite the medication and pain, began working with its usual methodical precision. What else? Diane's been changing, Vince. New clothes, expensive jewelry, different hair. She's been going to the city twice a week for charity work. I ran into her once at that fancy steakhouse downtown. She was with Cross, and they looked intimate. The heart monitor's beeping increased as Vincent's blood pressure rose. Dr. Tate appeared as if summoned by the machines. "Mr. Wiggins, you need to stay calm. Your heart can't handle this kind of stress right now." "Doctor," Vincent said, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him, "I need to ask you something. If someone were to, hypothetically, fake a medical emergency to manipulate someone else, what would that look like?" Dr. Tate frowned. "That's an oddly specific question." "What?" Vincent held up his phone, showing the increasingly desperate messages from Diane. "Because I think my wife is about to try exactly that." As if on cue, his phone rang. Diane's contact photo, a smiling image from their last anniversary dinner, filled the screen. Vincent looked at Alan and Dr. Tate, then answered. "Hello, Diane." "Vincent, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." Her voice carried a tremor that might have fooled him a week ago. "I've been in the hospital. Heart attack. But I suppose you knew that, since the hospital called you immediately." A pause. I was going to come, but Kayla was having a crisis, and I thought. "I saw the photos, Diane. The family barbecue. The restaurant. The caption about toxic energy." Another pause, longer this time. "Vincent, we need to talk. But first, there's an emergency. Something's wrong with the accounts. The bank is asking about some transfers, and I can't access." "Brandon Cross," Vincent said quietly. The silence stretched so long Vincent thought the call had dropped. When Diane spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the trembling, desperate wife. In its place was something cold and calculating. "I don't know what you think you know, Vincent, but you're not thinking clearly. You just had a heart attack. You're on medication. Maybe you should focus on getting better before you start making accusations." Vincent felt something shift inside him, like a structure finally collapsing after long deterioration. The man who'd built his life on trust and loyalty was dying as surely as if his heart had stopped completely. What was being born in his place was something altogether different. You're right, Diane. I should focus on getting better. Don't worry about the bank accounts. I'll handle everything when I get home. When will that be? Vincent looked at Dr. Tate, who held up 3 fingers. 3 days. Good. We'll talk then. And Vincent, I love you. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Vincent almost admired its craftsmanship. I love you too. He hung up and turned to Alan. I need you to do something for me. Quietly. Anything. I want to know everything about Brandon Cross. Every business deal, every relationship, every parking ticket. And I want to know exactly what Diane's been doing for the past 6 months. Bank records, credit cards, phone logs, everything. Alan nodded grimly. What are you thinking? Vincent's smile was nothing like the warm expression his friends and family knew. It was the smile of a man who'd spent 20 years learning how to destroy things as carefully as he built them. I'm thinking that some structures need to be torn down before you can build something better. Chapter 4. The Blueprint. Vincent spent his remaining days in the hospital like a general planning a campaign. Alan brought him laptops, files, and information gathered from their network of contacts throughout the region. What emerged was a picture of betrayal so systematic and calculated that Vincent felt his last reservations about what he planned to do evaporate like morning mist. Brandon Cross was 45, twice divorced, and had left a trail of financial ruin across 3 states. His method was always the same. Identify wealthy married women unhappy with their lives, seduce them with promises of excitement and freedom, then use their insider knowledge to destroy their husbands' businesses before disappearing with whatever assets he could liquidate. Diane hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been systematically feeding Cross information about Vincent's business, client lists, and financial arrangements. Bank records showed she'd been siphoning money from their joint accounts to fund Cross's lifestyle. The expensive jewelry, the new clothes, the restaurant bills, all paid for with money Vincent had earned through 20 years of backbreaking work. But the discovery that truly transformed Vincent's grief into something harder and more dangerous was a recorded phone conversation Alan had obtained through his connections at the phone company. Diane and Cross, planning their next move while Vincent lay unconscious in intensive care. The heart attack is perfect timing. Cross's voice was smooth, confident. Stress from the business, overwork. It gives us cover for when his empire starts crashing down. What about Kayla? Diane's voice carried no trace of the woman who'd once cried at sad movies. She's young. She'll adapt. Kids always side with whoever has the money, and soon that won't be Daddy Dearest. And if he recovers? If he finds out? Cross's laugh was like breaking glass. Honey, men like Vincent Wiggins are all the same. They build their lives on trust and loyalty because they can't imagine anyone being different. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be long gone, and he'll be too busy trying to save his business to come after us. Vincent had listened to the recording 3 times, his expression never changing. Alan watched him with growing concern. Vince, what are you thinking? Vincent closed the laptop and looked out the hospital window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, his wife was planning his destruction with her lover, confident that his basic decency would protect them from any real consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Alan, I need you to call Russ Willis. Alan frowned. Russ Willis was a private investigator they'd used occasionally for employee background checks, but he was known for taking on jobs that existed in legal gray areas. What kind of job are we talking about? The kind where we don't ask too many questions about methods, and Russ doesn't ask too many questions about budget. Vincent turned back to Alan, and his friend barely recognized the man looking back at him. Gone was the trusting, good-natured contractor who believed in fair dealing and honest work. In his place sat someone calculating and cold. I want to know everything about Brandon Cross. Where he lives, what he drives, who he owes money to, what he's afraid of. I want copies of every document, every contract, every dirty little secret he's tried to hide. And Diane? Diane gets to watch what happens when you underestimate someone you think you know. Dr. Tate released Vincent the following morning with strict instructions about diet, exercise, and stress management. Vincent nodded at all the appropriate moments while internally cataloging the resources he'd need for what came next. Alan drove him home to the house on Cedar Hill. The house Vincent had designed and built with his own hands as a symbol of everything he'd achieved. Now it felt like walking into a mausoleum. Diane was waiting in the kitchen, and Vincent had to admit she played her part perfectly. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if from crying, her face etched with concern. She rushed to embrace him, and Vincent let her, noting how her expensive perfume, the one he'd never bought her, seemed to cling to his clothes. "Vincent, I was so worried. I'm sorry I wasn't there immediately. I was just so scared and I didn't know what to do." "It's okay," Vincent said, his voice gentle. "I understand." She pulled back to study his face. "You do. A heart attack is scary for everyone. You needed time to process." He touched her cheek with a tenderness that felt like handling a snake. "We'll get through this together." Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something that might have been disappointment. Vincent recognized it now. She'd been hoping he'd be angry, give her an excuse to escalate their problems into something that justified her betrayal. Instead, he was going to be the perfect, understanding husband right up until the moment he destroyed her world. Chapter 5. The Preparation. Vincent returned to work gradually, following doctor's orders while secretly implementing the most complex project of his career. To everyone around him, he appeared to be a man focused on recovery and reconciliation. He brought Diane flowers, suggested couples therapy, and spoke earnestly about wanting to rebuild their marriage. Behind the scenes, Russ Willis worked like a man possessed. The information he gathered painted Brandon Cross as even more dangerous than Alan's initial research had suggested. Cross wasn't just a con man. He was a predator who'd left a trail of destroyed families across the Southeast. "This guy's a piece of work," Russ reported during a clandestine meeting at a construction site outside town. 3 previous marriages, all ending with the wives cleaned out financially. He's got gambling debts in Vegas, owes money to some very unfriendly people in Miami, and there's a warrant out for his arrest in Georgia for fraud. What kind of fraud? Investment scam. Convinced a bunch of retirees to put their savings into a resort development that never existed. Took them for about $2 million before disappearing. Vincent absorbed this information with the same methodical attention he gave to building specifications. What about his relationship with Diane? They're not being subtle anymore. Meeting twice a week at that boutique hotel downtown. She's been using your credit cards to pay for the rooms. Russ slid a folder across the table. Photos, receipts, timeline of their meetings. Plus something interesting. Cross has been pressing her to get you to invest in his lakefront development project. Vincent opened the folder and studied the photographs. Diane and Cross in intimate conversation over dinner, walking hand in hand through the hotel lobby, kissing in the parking garage. But it was the final photo that made Vincent's blood run cold. Diane handing Cross what appeared to be documents from Vincent's office safe. "Those look like the Morrison Project blueprints," Vincent said quietly. $1 million project, right? Cross has been trying to poach your clients for months. Word is he's underbidding you on jobs using insider information. Vincent closed the folder and looked at Russ. "I need you to do something else for me. It's going to require some creative interpretation of privacy laws." Russ grinned. "My favorite kind of job. What do you need?" "I want Brandon Cross to believe he's about to get everything he's ever wanted. And I want Diane to believe she's finally free to pursue her happiness." Vincent's smile was arctic. "Then I want to take it all away from them, piece by piece, until they understand what they've really lost." That evening, Vincent announced to Diane that he'd been reconsidering his business strategy. Perhaps it was time to think bigger, take on more ambitious projects. He mentioned, almost casually, that he'd heard about a lakefront development opportunity that might be worth exploring. Diane's eyes lit up with an interest she hadn't shown in his business for years. "What kind of development?" "Luxury resort. High-end clientele. The kind of project that could set us up for life." Vincent watched her face carefully. "I met the developer at the hospital benefit last month. Brandon Cross. Seemed like a sharp guy." "Brandon Cross." Diane's voice was carefully neutral. I think I've heard that name. Really? Where? Oh, around. Charity events, I think. She turned away to hide her expression. What kind of investment would something like that require? Significant. Maybe liquidate some of our assets, leverage the business. It's risky, but the returns could be enormous. That night, Vincent lay awake listening to Diane type messages on her phone in the bathroom. He knew she was telling Cross that their plan was working perfectly, that Vincent was about to hand them everything they needed to complete his destruction. They had no idea they were walking into a trap 2 decades in the making. Chapter 6. The Foundation Cracks. Vincent's first move was to contact his lawyer, Julius Page, under the pretense of updating his will after the heart attack. In reality, he was restructuring his assets in ways that would prove crucial in the coming weeks. The family home, the business, the investment accounts. Everything was quietly repositioned to give Vincent maximum control when the time came to act. Meanwhile, he played the role of the eager investor, scheduling meetings with Brandon Cross to discuss the lakefront development. Cross was everything Vincent had expected, smooth, confident, and completely convinced of his own superiority. He spoke about the resort project with the enthusiasm of a true believer, painting visions of luxury accommodations and high-end clientele, while subtly probing for information about Vincent's financial situation. The beauty of this location, Cross said, spreading architectural renderings across Vincent's office conference table, is that it's currently undervalued. The previous owners didn't understand its potential. Vincent studied the plans with the eye of someone who'd been in construction for 20 years. The designs were impressive, but fundamentally flawed. The foundation specifications were inadequate for lakefront construction. The drainage system would fail within 5 years, and the projected costs were at least 30% below what the project would actually require. Interesting approach to the structural engineering, Vincent said mildly. Have you had these reviewed by a local firm familiar with lake effect soil conditions? Cross waved dismissively. My team has handled dozens of waterfront projects. Sometimes local contractors get too conservative, afraid to think big. Vincent nodded as if convinced, while mentally noting that Cross's team probably existed only on paper. The man was planning to take Vincent's money and disappear long before anyone noticed the project's fundamental impossibility. What kind of initial investment are we talking about? For someone of your reputation and resources, I want you as a primary partner. $2 million to start, with additional investments as we reach development milestones. $2 million, roughly what Vincent could access quickly without triggering lengthy legal processes. Cross had done his homework. I'll need to discuss this with my financial advisors, Vincent said. And my wife, of course. Big decisions like this affect the whole family. Cross's smile was predatory. Of course. Family unity is so important in business ventures. That evening, Vincent shared the day's developments with Diane over dinner. He watched her performance with newfound appreciation for her acting skills. The careful questions designed to seem supportive while gathering intelligence. The enthusiasm that seemed genuine but felt calculated. $2 million is a lot of money, Vincent. Are you sure this is wise so soon after your heart attack? The doctor said I need to reduce stress, not eliminate ambition. Besides, this could be our chance to really secure our future. Kayla's education, our retirement, maybe that house in Tuscany you've always wanted. Diane's eyes softened at the mention of Tuscany. And for a moment, Vincent glimpsed the woman he'd fallen in love with 20 years earlier. The recognition brought no warmth, only a clinical interest in how completely that woman had been replaced by someone else. If you think it's the right move, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. I trust your judgment. The lie was so smooth, it was almost artistic. 2 days later, Russ Willis called with news that accelerated Vincent's timeline considerably. Cross is getting antsy. He's been making calls to some associates in Charlotte, talking about wrapping up his business here and moving on. I think he's planning to take your money and run sooner than we thought. How much sooner? Word is he's got a flight booked to the Cayman Islands next Friday. One way. Vincent felt a familiar sensation, the same focused calm that came over him when a project reached its critical phase. All the planning, all the preparation, All the careful positioning was about to be tested. What about Diane? According to the surveillance, she thinks she's going with him. They've been looking at properties in Georgetown, talking about starting fresh somewhere without extradition treaties. Vincent closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His wife wasn't just betraying him. She was planning to disappear entirely, leaving him to deal with the wreckage while she started a new life with stolen money and a dangerous con man. Russ, I need you to set up a meeting with some people. It's time to move to the next phase. What kind of people? Vincent's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The kind who don't appreciate being stolen from. Brandon Cross owes money to some very patient creditors in Miami. I think it's time they learned where to find him. Chapter 7. The Collapse. Vincent's years in construction had taught him that the most spectacular collapses began with the failure of single, critical support. For Brandon Cross, that support was his assumption that his victims would never fight back effectively. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday morning when Cross arrived at his temporary office to find two men in expensive suits waiting for him. Vincent, watching from across the street through binoculars, saw Cross's face go white as he recognized the visitors from Miami. Russ Willis had done his job perfectly. The men weren't there to hurt Cross, yet, but to deliver a message that his gambling debts had reached the point where patience was no longer a viable option. They wanted their money, with interest, within 72 hours. Cross's confident facade crumbled like a poorly built foundation. Vincent watched him make frantic phone calls, pace his office like a caged animal, and finally called Diane with increasing desperation. Meanwhile, Vincent was implementing the second phase of his plan. He'd arranged a lunch meeting with Cross to finalize their investment agreement. But this time he brought Julius Page as his attorney and several documents that Cross would find very interesting. Before we proceed, Vincent said, sliding a folder across the restaurant table, my legal team needs to clarify a few things about your background. Cross opened the folder and his face went ashen. Inside were copies of the fraud warrant from Georgia, documentation of his debts in Miami, and a detailed timeline of his relationship with Diane, complete with photographs and credit card receipts. I don't understand, Cross said, his voice hoarse. What is this? This is what my private investigator calls due diligence, Vincent replied calmly. You see, Brandon, I've been in business for 20 years. I didn't get where I am by making investments without thoroughly researching my partners. Cross looked around the restaurant as if planning an escape route. Look, Vincent, I can explain. No need. I understand completely. You target married women with wealthy husbands, seduce them, use their insider knowledge to destroy their husbands' businesses, then disappear with whatever money you can steal. It's actually quite efficient. You don't know what you're talking about. Vincent placed his phone on the table and pressed play. Cross's own voice filled the space between them. The heart attack is perfect timing. Stress from the business, overwork, it gives us cover for when his empire starts crashing down. The recording continued for 30 seconds that felt like hours. When it ended, Cross was gripping the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent said, his voice conversational. You're going to call Diane and tell her the deal is off. You're going to return every penny you've taken from my accounts. And then you're going to disappear from my life permanently. And if I don't, Vincent smiled, and Julius Page shifted uncomfortably in his seat. If you don't, I'll give copies of this information to the FBI, the Georgia State Police, and those gentlemen from Miami who visited you this morning. I'll also send it to every potential victim I can find, along with your photo and current location. Cross was silent for a long moment. You can't prove anything about Diane and me. I don't need to prove anything to anyone except my wife. And I have enough evidence to convince her that continuing this relationship would be unwise. That evening, Vincent came home to find Diane in a state of barely controlled panic. She was pacing the kitchen, her phone clutched in her trembling hands. Vincent, thank God you're home. Something terrible has happened. What's wrong? It's Brandon Cross. You remember a developer? Something's gone wrong with his business. The police are asking questions about his finances, and he's talking about leaving town suddenly. She grabbed Vincent's arms. What if he was trying to scam you? What if you'd invested with him? Vincent marveled at her performance. Even knowing she was lying, Part of him was impressed by her ability to seem genuinely concerned for his welfare. "That's terrible," he said. "Good thing I decided to wait on that investment." Relief flooded her features. "You did." Something felt off about the whole deal. 20 years in business teaches you to trust your instincts. He pulled her into an embrace, feeling her body relax against him. "Don't worry about it, honey. We'll find other opportunities." But Vincent wasn't done. The real reckoning was still to come. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The final phase of Vincent's plan required perfect timing and a thorough understanding of human nature. He'd learned long ago that people revealed their true character under pressure, and he was about to apply more pressure than Diane had ever experienced. It began with a family dinner that Vincent had carefully orchestrated. Kayla was home from college, and Vincent had invited Alan North and his wife, along with Marina Brennan and her husband, people who'd been part of their social circle for years. During dessert, Vincent stood and raised his wine glass. "I wanted to share some news with everyone. After my heart attack, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what really matters in life." The table fell silent, everyone expecting a speech about family and second chances. "I've decided to make some major changes. First, I'm restructuring the business to ensure its long-term stability. Alan will be taking over day-to-day operations while I focus on strategic planning." Alan nodded, playing his part perfectly. They'd rehearsed this moment carefully. "Second, I'm liquidating some assets to pursue new opportunities. We're putting the house on the market next week." Diane's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "What? I know it's sudden, but I've realized we don't need all this space. We can downsize, maybe get a place closer to town. Use the equity for investments and travel." "Vincent, we need to discuss this privately." "Actually, there's more." Vincent's smile was warm and genuine, which made what came next even more devastating. "I've also been reviewing our finances, making sure everything's in order." Imagine my surprise when I discovered some irregularities. The silence around the table was deafening. Marina Brennan had gone pale, and Vincent knew she'd been aware of Diane's affair all along. "What kind of irregularities?" Kayla asked. Vincent pulled out a folder, different from the one he'd shown Cross, but equally damning. "Unauthorized withdrawals from our joint accounts. Expenses I didn't recognize. Credit card charges at hotels I've never visited." Diane stood abruptly. "Vincent, please. Not here. Not in front of everyone." "Why not? These people are our friends. They deserve to know the truth about what's been happening in our marriage." Vincent opened the folder and spread photographs across the dinner table. Images of Diane and Brandon Cross at restaurants, hotels, walking hand in hand through downtown Charlotte. The timestamps showed dates when Diane had claimed to be at charity events or visiting her sister. Kayla stared at the photos, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and horror. "Mom? Who is this man?" "His name is Brandon Cross," Vincent said gently. "He's a con artist who specializes in seducing married women to gain access to their husband's finances. Your mother has been having an affair with him for 8 months." "That's not true." Diane's voice was shrill, desperate. "Vincent's been stressed since his heart attack. He's not thinking clearly." Vincent placed his phone on the table and pressed play. Diane's own voice filled the room. "Life is too short not to be happy. Here's to new adventures with people who actually appreciate you." The social media post played through the phone speaker, followed by text messages between Diane and Cross discussing their plans to liquidate Vincent's assets and disappear together. Kayla pushed back from the table, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, how could you do this?" "Sweetheart, you don't understand. Your father and I, we haven't been happy for years. We've just been going through the motions. So while he was in the hospital, fighting for his life, you were celebrating?" Kayla's voice broke. "You called him toxic. You said we needed family time without the drama." Alan North stood slowly, his face filled with disgust. "Diane, I think you should leave. This is my house." "Actually," Vincent said, consulting a legal document, "as of this morning, the house is in my name only. Seems there were some irregularities with the original deed that needed correcting." Diane stared at him, finally understanding that this wasn't a confrontation born of emotion or suspicion. This was a systematic dismantling of her life, planned and executed with the same precision Vincent brought to his construction projects. Where am I supposed to go? I hear Brandon Cross has a hotel room downtown. Although given that the FBI issued a warrant for his arrest this afternoon, you might want to find alternative accommodations. The dinner party dissolved into chaos as Diane fled upstairs to pack. Kayla sobbed in Marina Brennan's arms, and Alan quietly began making phone calls to lawyers. Vincent sat calmly at the head of his dining room table, surrounded by the wreckage of his 20-year marriage, and felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months later, Vincent stood on the deck of his new house, a smaller but more elegant home overlooking a different part of the lake. The sunrise painted the water gold, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely content. Kayla had transferred to a local university to be closer to him, their relationship stronger than it had ever been. She'd testified at her mother's trial, her voice steady as she described the emotional manipulation and lies that had characterized their family life for months. Diane was serving 18 months for fraud and conspiracy. Brandon Cross had received 5 years and was facing additional charges in 3 other states. The investigation had uncovered a network of similar schemes stretching back over a decade. Alan knocked on the door frame behind him. The Morrison project just passed final inspection. Clients thrilled. Good. What's next on the schedule? That resort project in Asheville. The legitimate one, with actual architectural plans and proper permits. Vincent smiled. Wiggins Construction had emerged from the scandal stronger than ever. Clients respected a man who'd faced betrayal and emerged victorious. And Vincent's reputation for integrity had only been enhanced by his methodical exposure of Cross's fraud. Any word from Diane? Her lawyer called yesterday. She wants to see you. Prison visitation. Vincent considered this. 6 months ago, the request would have filled him with rage or pain. Now it simply felt irrelevant. Tell him no. I'm busy building something new. Alan studied his friend's profile. Any regrets? Vincent thought about the question seriously. 20 years of marriage, a daughter he adored, a life he'd built with his own hands, all of it poisoned by betrayal and lies. But from the ashes of that destruction, he'd built something better, a clearer understanding of his own strength, a business freed from the complications of deception, and relationships based on honesty rather than convenience. You know what I learned from all this? Vincent said finally. What's that? Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. Diane spent months convinced that I was too weak, too trusting, too decent to ever fight back effectively. She confused kindness with weakness, patience with stupidity. Vincent turned to go inside, then paused. The truth is, I didn't destroy her life. I just stopped protecting her from the life she chose to build. Everything that happened after that was the natural result of her own decisions. As he walked through his new home, smaller than the old one, but built entirely for himself, Vincent felt the satisfaction that came from a job completed correctly. He'd torn down a structure that had become unsound and built something better in its place. Outside, the lake reflected the morning sky like a mirror, its surface unmarked by the storms that had raged across it in previous seasons. Vincent poured himself coffee and began reviewing the plans for his next project, a community center for at-risk youth, funded by the money he'd recovered for Brandon Cross's scheme. Some foundations, once cracked, could never be repaired. But from the rubble of what had fallen, it was always possible to build something stronger, something that would last. Vincent Wiggins had learned to build many things in his 42 years. Now he was building the most important structure of all, a life based on truth, surrounded by people who deserved his trust, and protected by the knowledge that he would never again mistake silence for peace or loyalty for love. The sunrise painted his new world in shades of gold and possibility, and Vincent Wiggins began another day of building something that would last. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. and I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. I never thought a spilled glass of orange juice would be the thread that unraveled my entire life. But sometimes the smallest moments reveal the deepest truths about the people we think we know. The sound of leather cutting through air is something you never forget. It's sharp, quick, followed by that distinctive snap that makes your stomach drop even when you're expecting it. But hearing it directed at your 6-year-old son while you're helpless to stop it, that changes everything. My wife took out belt for our son when he spilled juice. I found myself thinking, the words burning in my mind as I watched Tommy's face crumple in terror. The orange juice was still spreading across our kitchen floor, a sticky golden puddle that seemed insignificant compared to what was about to happen. "Rebecca, stop!" I lunged forward, but her sister Linda was faster, snatching my phone from my hands as I tried to dial 911. "It was just a belt." Linda laughed, her voice sharp with mockery. "You're raising a brat. You should thank your wife." Her husband Greg nodded for the kitchen doorway, his massive frame blocking any escape route I might have considered. "She's right, Mike. Kid needs discipline. You're too soft." They had no idea what I would do next. But then again, neither did I. Let me back up and tell you how we got here, because the belt incident wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment everything became crystal clear. I'm Mike Holloway, and 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. 34 years old, successful construction company owner, beautiful wife of 8 years, and a son who meant everything to me. We lived in Millbrook, a small town outside Nashville where everyone knew everyone, and reputation mattered more than money. My construction business, Holloway Builders, had grown from a one-man operation to a crew of 23 men. I'd built half the custom homes in the county, including the sprawling ranch house where Rebecca, Tommy, and I lived. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, especially considering I'd started with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox my father left me when he died in a factory accident when I was 19. Rebecca and I met at a church function when I was 26. She was 24, a kindergarten teacher with honey blonde hair and the kind of smile that made you forget your own name. Her family had money. Her father owned 3 car dealerships across Middle Tennessee, but she'd chosen teaching because she wanted to make a difference. I fell hard and fast, and when she said yes to my proposal after 6 months of dating, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. The first few years were good, really good. Rebecca was everything I'd imagined in a wife, supportive, loving, and when Tommy came along, she seemed to transform into the perfect mother. She quit teaching to stay home with him, and I worked extra hours to make sure she never had to worry about money. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that started forming around year 5. Rebecca began spending more time with her sister Linda, who'd married Greg Paulson, a man I'd never liked. Greg was one of those guys who never worked an honest day in his life, but always had money for expensive trucks and fishing trips. He dealt in investments and opportunities, though no one could ever explain exactly what he did for a living. Linda was the opposite of Rebecca in every way that mattered. Where Rebecca had been sweet and gentle, Linda was sharp and calculating. She had this way of making cutting remarks and then laughing them off as jokes. "I'm just being honest," she'd say whenever someone called her out. The change in Rebecca was gradual. She started criticizing the way I disciplined Tommy, or rather, the way I didn't. "He needs a firm hand, Mike," she'd say. "Boys need to learn respect." I'd grown up with a belt across my back more times than I could count, courtesy of a father who believed children should be seen and not heard. I'd sworn I'd never lay a hand on my son, and I'd kept that promise. Timeouts, taking away privileges, talking through problems, these were my methods. They worked fine until Rebecca decided they didn't. The first time she hit Tommy, he was 4. He'd drawn on the wall with crayons, and before I could stop her, she'd smacked him across the face so hard it left a red handprint. I'd been furious, but she'd cried and apologized, saying her sister had told her she was being too lenient. "Linda says I'm spoiling him," she'd sobbed into my chest. "She says you're making me weak." I should have put my foot down then. Should have told Linda to mind her own business and insisted Rebecca never hit our son again. Instead, I talked to Rebecca about gentler methods, thinking I could guide her back to the woman I'd married. I was wrong. The incidents became more frequent. A wooden spoon for talking back. A yank on the arm for not eating his vegetables. Each time, Rebecca had an excuse, and each time, Linda was behind it, filling her head with ideas about old-fashioned discipline and modern parenting weakness. I started documenting everything, taking photos of bruises, writing down dates and times. I wasn't sure what I planned to do with the evidence, but something deep inside me knew I'd need it eventually. Then came a morning that changed everything. Tommy had been excited about having Aunt Linda and Uncle Greg over for Sunday brunch. He'd helped me make pancakes the night before, measuring ingredients with the serious concentration only a 6-year-old could muster. When breakfast time came, he was bouncing in his chair, chattering about the cartoons he wanted to show Uncle Greg. The orange juice glass was full, maybe too full. When Tommy gestured enthusiastically while telling a story about his friend at school, his elbow caught the glass, sending it tumbling across the table and onto the kitchen floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's face went dark in a way I'd never seen before. Without a word, she stood up, walked to the pantry closet, and pulled out the leather belt I didn't even know she'd bought. "Rebecca, no." My voice was calm, but my heart was racing. "It was an accident. Accidents have consequences, Mike." Her voice was cold, controlled. "Tommy needs to learn that." Tommy started crying before she even took a step toward him. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I didn't mean to." Sorry doesn't clean up messes, Thomas. She never called him Thomas unless she was angry. Turn around. That's when I moved, reaching for my phone to call 911. I'd had enough. This was going to stop, right now, even if it meant having my own wife arrested. But Linda was faster, snatching the phone from my hands with a laugh that made my blood boil. "It was just a belt," she said, her eyes dancing with amusement. "You're raising a brat. You should thank your wife." Greg stepped into the kitchen then, his 6'4" frame filling the doorway. At 41, he was built like the college football player he'd once been, though his muscle had gone soft around the edges. Still, he was intimidating when he wanted to be. "She's right, Mike," he said, crossing his arms. "Kid needs discipline. You're too soft." I looked at my son, cowering in his chair, tears streaming down his face. I looked at my wife, belt in hand, her jaw set with determination. I looked at Linda, still holding my phone, smirking like this was the best entertainment she'd had all week. And I looked at Greg, blocking my path to help my son. That's when something inside me broke. Not snap, broke, like a dam giving way after years of pressure. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Linda's smirk faltered. I said, "Get out. Now." Greg pushed off from the doorframe. "Now hold on, Mike. Get out." The roar that came from my throat surprised even me. "Get out of my house." Rebecca lowered the belt, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Mike, what's gotten into you?" "What's gotten into me?" I turned to face her, and she actually took a step back. "What's gotten into you? When did you become someone who terrorizes our son? When did you start listening to," I gestured at Linda, "her about how to raise our child?" "I'm just trying to." "You're trying to beat a 6-year-old for spilling juice." I knelt down next to Tommy, pulling him into my arms. He was shaking. "It's okay, buddy. Daddy's here." "Mike, you're overreacting," Greg said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. I stood up slowly, Tommy still in my arms, and looked Greg directly in the eyes. "If you're not out of my house in 30 seconds, I'm going to make you leave." "And Greg, you don't want to find out what that looks like." He must have seen something in my face that convinced him I wasn't bluffing. After a moment of tense silence, he grabbed Linda's arm. "Come on, let's go." Linda threw my phone on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Fine, but don't come crying to us when he ends up in jail because you couldn't teach him right from wrong." They left, and the house fell silent except for Tommy's quiet sniffling against my shoulder. Rebecca stood in the middle of the kitchen, still holding the belt, looking lost. "We need to talk," I said. What I didn't know was that our marriage was already over. The woman I'd fallen in love with was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And what I was about to discover would make the belt incident look like a minor disagreement. That evening, after Tommy was in bed, Rebecca and I sat in our living room for the hardest conversation of our marriage. She tried to justify what had happened, explaining how Linda had convinced her that my permissive parenting was damaging Tommy's development. She showed me articles, Mike, studies about how children need structure and consequences. Structure doesn't mean terrorizing him with a belt, Rebecca. It's not terrorism. It's discipline. The way I was raised. The way you were raised. The way I was raised was wrong. That's why I promised myself I'd never hit my son. We went in circles for hours. She couldn't see that what she was doing was abuse, and I couldn't understand how the woman who used to sing lullabies to our baby had turned into someone who could make him cower in fear. Finally, around midnight, Rebecca went to bed. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to fix this. That's when I heard her phone buzz on the kitchen counter where she'd left it charging. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but something made me get up and check the screen. It was a text from someone named D, with a heart emoji next to the name. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Greg and Linda are perfect alibis. Your husband has no idea how often we've been together. My world tilted sideways. I scrolled up through the message history with trembling fingers, and what I found made me physically sick. Months of messages, plans to meet, declarations of love, pictures I never wanted to see. D was Derek Massey, a guy I'd gone to high school with. He was a real estate agent now, divorced, and apparently had been sleeping with my wife for over 6 months. The worst part? Linda and Greg knew. They'd been helping cover for her, providing alibis for her shopping trips and girls' days out. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, reading through message after message, watching my marriage disintegrate in real time through text exchanges. Rebecca had never loved Derek in high school. Even a nobody, a skinny kid with thick glasses who got picked on by guys like me. But somewhere along the way, he'd grown into himself, built a successful business, and caught my wife's attention. The messages revealed a plan that made my blood run cold. Rebecca and Derek had been discussing divorce proceedings, figuring out how to maximize her settlement. She'd been documenting every purchase I made, every business decision, preparing to paint me as irresponsible with money. Linda had been coaching her, teaching her which lawyers to contact, how to present herself as the victim. They planned to take Tommy. They planned to take my house. They planned to take half my business. And they thought I was too stupid to figure it out. By the time Rebecca woke up that morning, I made copies of everything. I transferred money to accounts she couldn't access. I called my lawyer, my accountant, and my most trusted foreman. But more importantly, I'd made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I was going to destroy them all. Rebecca came downstairs around 9, already dressed in her yoga clothes, hair pulled back in the ponytail she wore when she was trying to look younger. She was meeting Derek, though she didn't know I knew that. Good morning, she said, not meeting my eyes. I'm going to yoga with Linda, then shopping. I'll be back around 5. Have fun, I said, not looking up from my coffee. She hesitated in the doorway, maybe sensing something different in my tone, but then left without another word. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before I called my brother Danny. Danny Holloway was 2 years younger than me, but twice as smart when it came to certain things. While I'd build houses, he built a private investigation business that served clients across 3 states. He specialized in infidelity cases, corporate espionage, and what he called reputation management. If you needed to know something about someone, Danny was your guy. Mike, what's wrong? He could hear it in my voice immediately. Everything. I need your help. 3 hours later, Danny was sitting in my kitchen, looking through the evidence I'd gathered. He whistled low when he saw some of the messages. Jesus, Mike, how long has this been going on? 6 months that I can prove. Maybe longer. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. What do you want to do about it? That was Danny. No judgment. No lectures about forgiveness or working things out. Just straight to business. I want to know everything. About Derek, about Linda and Greg's involvement, about the lawyer she's been talking to. Everything. That's easy enough. But Mike, he paused, choosing his words carefully. What's your endgame here? You file for divorce. You'll probably get joint custody, maybe full custody if we can prove the abuse. You'll keep most of the business, the house. You'll be fine financially. I thought about Tommy cowering in his chair, about the belt in Rebecca's hands, about the months of lies and planning behind my back. That's not enough. What do you mean? I met his eyes, and I could see he understood before I even said it. I mean, I want them all to pay. Really pay. Not just lose half their assets in a divorce settlement. I want them destroyed. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Mike, be very careful what you're asking for. Once you go down this road, there's no coming back. There's already no coming back. The question is whether I'm going to be the victim or the one holding the hammer. He nodded slowly. Okay, give me a week. What Danny uncovered in that week was worse than I'd imagined. Derek wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was stealing from his clients. As a real estate agent, he had access to empty houses during showings. He'd been using those houses for drug deals, taking a cut from a dealer named Carlos Vega, who operated out of Nashville. Derek's real estate business was basically a front for money laundering. Linda and Greg were deeper in the drug trade than I'd suspected. Greg's mysterious investments were actually loans to dealers, with interest rates that would make a mob boss blush. Linda handled the books, washing money through fake consulting contracts with Derek's real estate company. The best part? Rebecca knew about all of it. The messages Danny found on Derek's computer, obtained through methods I didn't ask about, showed she'd been helping plan expansion into neighboring counties. My sweet kindergarten teacher wife was going to be a drug money accountant. They'd planned to use my business as a front once they got control of it in the divorce. Holloway Builders would become a cash-washing operation for half the dealers in Middle Tennessee. I'd built that company with my bare hands, and they wanted to turn it into a criminal enterprise. But Danny's investigation also revealed something else. They were all careful. Very careful. The drug money was hidden behind layers of legitimate transactions. The evidence was there, but it would take a lot of work to prove in court. They'd probably get away with it if I just turned them into the police. That's when Danny made a suggestion that changed everything. You know what would really hurt them? He said, showing me a photograph of Derek's warehouse on the outskirts of town. If someone anonymously tipped off Carlos Vega that Derek was skimming from the drug money. Is he? Oh yeah, about 20%, according to the books Linda keeps. Vega just doesn't know it yet. I stared at the photograph, understanding immediately what Danny was suggesting. You're talking about getting them killed. I'm talking about letting criminals handle criminals. We just provide information. What happens after that isn't our responsibility. It was tempting. So tempting I could taste it. But I shook my head. Too easy. I want them to suffer first. I want them to know it was me. That's when I came up with a plan that would destroy all four of them systematically, legally, and completely. It started with Tommy. The next Monday morning, I took my son to see Dr. Patricia Westbrook, the best child psychologist in Nashville. I brought along the photographs I'd taken of his bruises, the documentation of Rebecca's abuse, and a detailed account of the belt incident. Dr. Westbrook was a small woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of gentle manner that made children feel safe. Tommy opened up to her immediately, describing not just the physical abuse, but the emotional terror he'd lived with for months. Mommy gets so angry, he told her, sitting in a chair that dwarfed his small frame. She says I'm bad. She says I make Daddy weak. My heart broke listening to him, but also hardened my resolve. Dr. Westbrook's report was devastating for Rebecca. She recommended immediate supervised visitation only, documented probable abuse, and suggested Tommy needed extensive therapy to deal with the trauma. I filed for emergency custody that Wednesday. Rebecca was served with papers at Derek's house on Thursday morning. Danny had been watching them, and he made sure the process server arrived just as Derek was leaving for work, still in his bathrobe, and clearly having spent the night. The photographs were beautiful. Rebecca called me screaming. You can't do this. You can't take Tommy away from me. Watch me. This is about Sunday, isn't it? About the belt? Mike, I was just trying to discipline him. No, Rebecca, this is about you being an unfit mother. This is about you abusing our son while planning to steal my business with your drug dealer boyfriend. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. See you in court. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Thomas Brennan, the best family attorney in the county and a man who owed me several favors from construction work I'd done on his house. Tom, they're going to come at me hard now. Are you ready? Mike, I've been ready since you showed me those text messages. They don't have a prayer. He was right, but it didn't stop them from trying. Within 24 hours, Linda had convinced Rebecca to hire Catherine Walsh, a shark of a divorce attorney from Nashville who specialized in taking men to the cleaners. Walsh immediately filed countermotions claiming I was abusive, that I'd been having an affair, that I was hiding money from the business. The affair allegation was particularly creative. They claimed I'd been sleeping with my office manager, Sandra, a 62-year-old grandmother who'd been like a mother to me since I started the business. The money-hiding allegation was closer to true, though not for the reasons they thought. I had been moving assets, but into trust funds for Tommy's future, not to hide them from Rebecca. Walsh also tried to get the abuse allegations thrown out, claiming I'd coached Tommy to lie about his mother. The war was on. For 3 weeks, it was brutal. Walsh attacked my character, my business practices, my relationship with Tommy. She painted me as a controlling husband who'd snapped when his wife tried to assert independence. Rebecca played the victim perfectly. She cried on cue, spoke in soft, wounded tones about how she'd only wanted what was best for Tommy, how she was devastated that I turned her child against her. Linda and Greg provided sworn statements about my violent temper and erratic behavior. They described the Sunday morning confrontation as me flying into a rage over normal child discipline. Derek stayed in the background, but his presence was felt. He was funding Rebecca's legal fees, giving her a place to stay, providing emotional support. They were careful not to be seen together publicly, but Danny's surveillance caught them together constantly. The first court hearing was a disaster. Judge Morrison was an old-school guy who believed in traditional families and second chances. He looked at Rebecca, blonde, well-dressed, tearful, and saw a mother being torn away from her child by an angry husband. He ordered temporary joint custody with supervised visits for both parents pending a full investigation. I walked out of that courthouse furious and humiliated. Rebecca and her legal team looked smug. Linda actually smirked at me in the hallway. That night, Danny found me in my garage, taking my anger out on a piece of wood I was supposed to be turning into a toy chest for Tommy. They think they've won, I said, not stopping my work. Have they? Not even close. I set down my tools and looked at him. It's time for phase 2, which is, we burn their whole world down. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I didn't need to prove Rebecca was connected to Derek's drug operation in family court. I just needed to make sure the right people found out about it at the right time. Danny and I spent the next week setting up what he called the domino effect. We carefully leaked information to the DEA about Derek's operation, providing just enough detail to get them interested without making it obvious where the tip came from. We also reached out to Carlos Vega through intermediaries, letting him know that Derek had been skimming from the drug profits and that Greg had been charging him inflated interest rates on loans. We provided evidence of both, taken directly from Linda's meticulous records. But the masterstroke was what we did with Rebecca's divorce lawyer. Catherine Walsh was dirty. Not drug-dealing dirty, but tax evasion, client fund-stealing dirty. Danny's investigation had uncovered a pattern of her borrowing from client trust accounts to cover personal expenses, always planning to pay it back before anyone noticed. She'd done it with Rebecca's retainer fee, using Derek's drug money to pay for a vacation to the Bahamas while claiming to be working on the case. We documented everything and sent it anonymously to the Tennessee Bar Association. Then we sat back and watched the fireworks. The DEA raid happened on a Tuesday morning. Derek was showing a house to potential buyers when federal agents swarmed the property. They found 2 kilos of cocaine hidden in the basement and enough financial records to trace the money laundering operation back 6 months. Derek folded immediately. Within hours, he was giving up everyone he could think of, including Greg, Linda, and half the dealers in the county. Carlos Vega's response was more direct. Greg's truck was found in the Cumberland River that Wednesday, with Greg still in it. The police called it a robbery gone wrong, but everyone knew better. Linda disappeared, just packed a bag and vanished, leaving behind her house, her car, and a husband's body floating in the river. Rebecca was arrested Thursday morning as an accessory to money laundering. The DEA had found evidence of her involvement in Derek's financial records, including plans to use Holloway Builders as a front operation. Catherine Walsh was disbarred and arrested Friday afternoon for misappropriating client funds. By the following Monday, Rebecca's entire support system had collapsed. Derek was in federal custody, Linda was gone, Greg was dead, and her lawyer was facing criminal charges. I picked her up from jail after she made bail. She looked terrible. Unwashed hair, pale skin, clothes that had been slept in. The confident woman who tried to take my son and my business was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. We drove in silence for 10 minutes before she finally spoke. I'm sorry. For which part? Abusing our son? Cheating on me? Planning to steal my business? Or getting involved with drug dealers? She started crying. I never meant for any of this to happen. Yes, you did. You planned all of it. Derek said. Derek's facing 25 to life in federal prison. What Derek said doesn't matter anymore. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the edge of town and turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over full custody of Tommy to me. You're going to waive any claim to the house, the business, or any other assets. You're going to plead guilty to whatever charges the federal prosecutor offers you. Mike, please. I'm not finished. In exchange, I won't release the additional evidence I have about your involvement in the drug operation. Evidence that would turn your accessory charge into conspiracy and add another 10 years to your sentence. Her face went white. What evidence? I handed her a folder containing printouts of text messages Danny had recovered from Derek's computer. Messages that showed Rebecca had been actively involved in planning the expansion of the drug operation into neighboring counties. She read them with shaking hands, her face growing paler with each page. How did you get these? Does it matter? The question is what you're going to do about it. She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the traffic passing by. If I sign everything over to you, you'll keep these secret as long as you stay away from Tommy and me. Permanently. What about visitation? He's my son, too. I leaned back in my seat, studying her face. She still didn't understand. Still thought there was a way to negotiate, to salvage something from the wreckage she'd created. Rebecca, you terrorized our 6-year-old son with a belt because he spilled juice. You planned to steal my business and turn it into a front for drug dealers. You cheated on me for months while pretending to be a loving wife and mother. What exactly makes you think you deserve visitation? I made mistakes. You made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. She signed the papers that afternoon. The federal prosecutor offered her a plea deal, 3 years in minimum security prison in exchange for testifying against Derek and providing information about the money laundering operation. She took it. Derek got 28 years. He'll be 67 when he gets out, assuming he survives that long in federal prison. Linda was never found. Danny heard rumors that she'd made it to Mexico, but I didn't care enough to verify them. Catherine Walsh got 18 months for stealing client funds and was permanently disbarred. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, watching Tommy eat pancakes and laugh at cartoons on his tablet. He was seeing Dr. Westbrook twice a week and was getting better every day. The nightmares had stopped. He wasn't afraid of sudden movements anymore. He was learning to be a kid again. The abuse charges against Rebecca had been dropped as part of her plea deal, but it didn't matter. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Danny stopped by around noon, bringing coffee and donuts from the shop downtown. How's he doing? He asked, nodding toward Tommy, who was building something elaborate with Legos in the living room. Better. Good days and bad days, but more good ones lately. And you? I thought about it. 6 months ago, I'd been a happily married father who thought he had the perfect life. Now, I was a single dad running a construction business, while my ex-wife served time in federal prison for drug-related charges. I'm good, I said, and realized I meant it. Any regrets? I looked at Tommy, completely absorbed in his Lego creation, safe and happy and free from fear. None. Danny nodded. What they did to him, they got what they deserved. They got justice. Is there a difference? I thought about that for a moment. Rebecca was in prison, but not for abusing Tommy, for money laundering. Derek was in prison, but not for sleeping with my wife, for drug trafficking. Greg was dead, but not because he'd helped them plan to steal my business, because he'd ripped off the wrong criminal. Justice would have been a family court judge who saw through Rebecca's act and protected my son. Justice would have been Derek and Linda and Greg facing consequences for their actual crimes against my family. What they got was karma. Dark, brutal karma delivered by the same criminal world they'd chosen to embrace. No, I finally said. I guess there isn't. Tommy came running into the kitchen, then holding up his Lego creation, a house with a garage and a little plastic man standing in the driveway. Look, Daddy, I built our house. That's awesome, buddy. Who's the little man? That's you. You're protecting the house from bad guys. I hugged him tight, breathing in the smell of his shampoo and feeling his small arms wrap around my neck. That's right, Tommy. Daddy always protects our house. Later that evening, after Tommy was asleep, I sat on my back porch with a beer, looking out at the property I'd built with my own hands. The house, the shop, the gardens Rebecca had planned, but I'd planted. All of it was mine now, free and clear. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Linda. I know what you did. I'm coming back for you. I read it twice, then deleted it and blocked the number. Let her come. Let them all come. I'd learned something important over the past year. I wasn't the man I'd thought I was. I wasn't the easygoing contractor who avoided conflict and tried to see the best in everyone. I was someone much more dangerous than that. I was a father who would do anything to protect his son, and a man who never forgot and never forgave betrayal. The belt incident had revealed who Rebecca really was.